I'd like to call this work session to order. This work session's on 2015-49. We go around the table and identify ourselves for the record. We'll start with you, ma'am.
I'm Barbara Simpson-Kraft from the law firm of Davis Wade Company.
Okay.
I am Terrence Chang with Peach Investments, LLC. Derek Chang, Peach Investments, LLC.
Chris Beck with Agnew Beck, helping to represent the consultant or represent the development company.
Tim Potter with Dell.
Jennifer Jaskin.
Bill Evans.
Dick Training.
L.B. Gray Jackson.
Bernie Hall. Tim Steele.
Amy Kembowski.
Pete Peterson.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
I am Shannon Zuskan, also with Agnew Beck. And I'm Tanya Iden, also with Agnew Beck.
Well, welcome to the meeting. We've got about an hour and a half, and that time will disappear rapidly. So, Chris, are you leading the discussion?
I guess I will be the informal master of ceremonies and doing some introductions, but I'll start us off. So,
Go ahead, sir.
definitely appreciate you taking time. I'm impressed by the variety and intensity of things you get to manage in a very small period, all earning the big pay that you get from this position. So what we would like to do is to share a little bit of information, but we're principally here to give you folks a chance to ask your questions. And so the way we are proposing to structure the presentation is a brief project overview, which I'll do, and then I'll be passing to Barbara to talk a little bit about the specific ordinance in front of you. And if there are any particular points of contention you'd like to bring up and point at, do so, and along the way the same. And I'll move quickly through this so we can really focus on the piece that is the specific subject in front of you. This comes up on Tuesday evening. And with that, maybe what I would like, not maybe, what I would like to do then is to introduce Derek, who introduced himself, and he can give you just a brief introduction to himself and his family.
Good afternoon, Assembly Chair, Assembly members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Derek Chang, and I'm Peach Investments. Today, along with my brother, Terrence Chang, who is with me here, trying to present this project to you. We are sons of Joseph and Maria Tang, and we are the second generations building owners, investors, and developers since 1998. Terrence has established roots here in Anchorage, Alaska, and that includes his two new young boys. One will be attending school next September. So I just want to give you some history of our company. We are actually based in San Francisco, and both Terrence and myself have full residence in Anchorage, Alaska. So here are just a few examples of what we have done in the past. The first two slides are 188, which again we have actually taken a small, undesirable lot and turned into something with a grander vision. And below, it's actually what we call a one-currently building that is currently in San Francisco, which we have worked diligently with both on the municipal level, the state level, as well as federal level, to preserve and restore historical building. And in turn, we actually won national awards in doing this project. So with that said, today we would like to ask the Assembly to support the designation of the two real estate parcels as deteriorated areas, based on the Anchorage Municipal Code 1235. The properties are the 598 West Northern Lights Boulevard in Midtown and Block 41 in downtown. And with that, I'm going to turn to Terrence and explain a little bit further on the downtown project.
Hi, good afternoon. So to elaborate on Derek's introduction, we want to share with you that both areas actually do contain properties that are that requires demolition and revitalization. The Northern Lights Hotel will be demolished. In regards to the downtown project, we do have full intention to recreate the vision and to capture the spirit by Cap Lathrop, whether from a pedestrian's point of view from walking along 4th Avenue Theater or from a visitor's first footstep into the project of the building development. So we believe revitalization in downtown is critical. And I would like Chris to continue the presentation.
Thanks for the introduction. So again, I'll move through this very quickly, because some of you have seen some of these things, some of them have been in the newspaper, but don't hesitate to raise a hand, and we'll get on to when Barbara can talk about the specifics of the ordinance. So I think the context for this is relevant, and I don't want to take us too far afield, but if you travel around America these days, I have to say I think there's a revitalization of downtowns. It's really sweeping the nation, and it's driven by changing demographics, changing appetites for where to live. Millennial groups, seniors, people in between are looking for concentrated, compact, diverse, walkable places, and they're springing up and coming to life. And consistently, if you look at the story that leads to that, it's been a public-private partnership in the spirit of the one that we're talking about here that's made that happen. The specifics on downtown show that it's not really keeping up with that trend. And one way to reference that is to go to the 2007 plan that was adopted and approved by this body, and it laid out what seemed like reasonable goals for downtown, and I have to say none of them have been met. And this is the list of those. The hope was for by this year to have 1.2 million office square feet put in, really good no net gain, to have 375 new hotel rooms, about 100 have been lost with the conversion of the hotel on 3rd Avenue to housing, and they have 185,000 square feet of new retail. If anything, it's going the other way. The Willowa project is very exciting, but it's in part replacing some things that are leaving. And I think it's also indication of a tilt towards summer activity as opposed to year-round activity. As a business owner downtown, a resident of town, I'm watching downtown become a place that people are shying away from as investors, and often just as a place they're a little worried about the safety issues. Some unfortunate headlines recently about downtown. New housing units, the target was 1,200, and this 100 has gone in. So some facts about the trajectory of downtown. That's the context for this project. Recently, we have Chris Schutte in the audience and Bill Pop who are driving this wonderful activity, this initiative, the Live, Work, Play effort. They wanted to get some facts about these subjects, talked to a lot of folks, got 630 responses to the question, where would you like to live? And the number one place that came out was downtown. And this follow-up question answered there was how to do that, and it was to develop deteriorated areas with new denser housing. So, switching gears, a proposed response to that context. Some of you have seen this. The location, many of you know, here's 4th Avenue, the familiar theater at the side, F Street, G Street, 5th, and next slide. So the specific parcels include the rebuilding today, the theater parcel, the vacant parcel where a long time ago Saks was located, and the Key Bank building. All of those together are really the heart of what allows this project to be successful. And the proposal in front of you is to work within the rules of 1235 to have that group of parcels labeled a deteriorated area. We'll give you the details on how that conclusion was reached, but that's the starting context. The second property, much simpler configuration, everyone's favorite eyesore is the Northern Lights Inn, which we've all passed by and wondered and hoped when something better might be in that location. Those two parcels are the ones that are in front of you in this ordinance for designation as deteriorated area, which sets the stage for tax abatement, which allows these projects to go forward. Without that, they would not be. Financially feasible. So, part of the context for this, I talked about the trends in America, in downtown. The Anchorage Comprehensive Plan, the 2007 plan, really looks like it was written with precisely this project in mind. And if you go through that, some of the language highlighted in red, talks about goal of the plan is to accommodate and encourage up to large numbers of housing by 2020, 4,000. Use tax increment timing and/or tax abatement as revenue sources. Expedited, fast track, land use and plan permitting, all of which is driven by this goal, a people-oriented, vibrant, 24/7 experience. The plan specifically calls out this location as an opportunity site. And this is the diagram that's shown up in the newspaper and circulated, and the very brief summary, starting with a key point. This is a conceptual and preliminary illustration. I think it expresses intent. A number of questions need to be answered before a specific design can be delivered. They're engineering questions, they're market questions, and they're partnership questions. But I think it does actually capture the spirit and the intent, and we're looking forward to working with you folks and the community as a whole to deliver something in this spirit. The short version of what's there is enter by way of the rebuilding site and the 4th Avenue Theater through a pedestrian galleria, kind of a highfalutin term. The vision that's, I think, in our mind is a little in the spirit of Pike Street Market, where I was 2 weeks ago watching people celebrate Alaska fish, and wishing, boy, I wish Alaska fish were being celebrated in our town. But the idea, not like the Fifth Avenue Mall, booths, activity, lots of pedestrians coming and going, taking advantage of Alaska products, and then having a destination in downtown that doesn't really exist. Above and below that is parking. Parking at the site is a key part of success. Above that, space for a large floor-plate office, and then above that, a tower rising up to about the height of the state office building, the other two high towers on 7th Avenue, which would be a combination of hotel and housing. So that grandly is what is proposed. The specifics on this notion of a galleria, some images you can see on the left that kind of go in the spirit I just described, of a lively place with local products. One of the things this project has the potential to do is to solve this chicken and egg problem that's confronting the effort to provide housing downtown, which is nobody quite wants to build housing downtown if there aren't the services that residents want. Nobody's quite willing to put in those services, a grocery store, a pharmacy, if there aren't residents downtown. This project could do both. So the notion is retain the facade, retain the sign, open the doors, continue to provide elements of what's on the inside of that theater, and then to use the adjoining building here to also provide an entry which links through to Fifth Avenue and on through to the ground floor level of the Key Bank building. So it's one integrated project. And the broader notion, this is sort of a physical and metaphorical explanation of the fact that it's intended not just for the benefits of the project site itself. It really does connect. The thought is perhaps an underground entry, a Beacon Center, linking Four Seasons Drive, wear your fancy shoes, be happy, between where you can park, where you could go to the PAC, where you could return and have creme brulee and the beverage of your choice later in the evening, having not wandered down G Street in the howling January night. The other thing, though, is in addition to the physical connections, our vision really is a long overdue catalyst for downtown development as a whole, a way to turn around a trajectory that's not been very positive in recent years. So it's good for the project, but it's really good for all of downtown. In a breathless burst, a summary of the benefits brings people and spending to downtown, life to the boarded up 4th Avenue Theater building, implements the downtown plan. The detail I haven't touched on that's important is right now there's about $235,000 generated in property tax from that set of properties each year. The proposal is to continue that, to allow it to grow as the consumer price index may increase. But that's stable into the future. And to take the increment of additional value the project would create and use that to make the project possible for 10 years, at which point there's a windfall and that number jumps to $2 or $3 million per year. That's particularly important in a town that's got water on two sides of mountains. If we want a bigger property tax base, we want after-school programs and a successful police department and good schools, and the state's not going to be delivering a lot of that money. Having new ways to raise revenues is an important piece. And finally, it's really a catalyst for new spending and support for jobs and business expansion. And I think with that, I will breathe, good for all of us, and ask Barbara if she could talk a little about the specifics, but maybe before switching the microphone, any questions about the vision, the concept?
Questions from assembly members before we move on?
Great, well, jump in if you get them, and Barbara, why don't you talk a little bit about this specific ordinance?
So the ordinance that's coming before you on Tuesday is a request to designate the property that the Northern Lights Inn is located on as a deteriorated area. It also includes a section that designates certain elements of Block 41 downtown as a designated area, as a deteriorated area, sorry. Those are the pieces that Chris identified. They're the Lot 2, which contains the Reed Building, Lots 3 and 4, where the theater is, the empty parking lot, and the Key Bank building are adjacent properties that would be wrapped into that parcel down there. So that the whole area down there within Lot 41, Block 41, is designated as the deteriorated area. That allows, in order to do that, it must be shown that each parcel that we're asking for fits within one of these categories. It either has to be unsafe, unsanitary, overcrowded, have environmental contamination, be vacant, overgrown, or an unsightly lot, have a disproportionate number of tax delinquent properties, economically or socially undesirable land uses. We don't have delinquent tax properties. This owner has paid their taxes. But we do have an unsafe building in the 4th Avenue Theater currently. In the Reed building, we only have one floor that's developed, and these details are in your AM. So, but the other 3 floors of that building are not code compliant, and they're not capable of being economically developed at this point in time. The cost to bring them up to code compliance and use them is too much. That means you're getting a reduced tax base there because they're not sufficiently developed. Then, studies have been done by this owner as to how to build something on those 3 lots that would function and be big enough to work and pencil, basically, be economically feasible. That doesn't happen unless you wrap in those 4 lots along 5th Avenue where the Key Bank building is located. And the intent there is that it's adjacent property that when you wrap it in, you have enough of a footprint to be able to develop a large project that can then pencil. The Key Bank building itself, it's not within the category of those first 5, but including it so that the first floor and maybe the second floor, but that area can be part of the Galleria, makes it, enhances and accelerates the development of that lot. There's also the 2 empty lots that are just a parking lot at this point in time. No tax revenues from that except for a little bit of land value, right? Wrapped into what we're paying right now for the 235. So that's what we have to show in that. That's what you have to find in order to give those properties at each location the designation. Next slide. Now, this is the first step, just declaring it as a designated area. The owners still have to come in with an application to request the tax incentives. That application has to be filed with the CFO. The CFO has up to 90 days to review that. The mayor needs to sign on to it. If they don't, there's a way to appeal it and bring it before you. But assuming they both agree, then it comes before you with a request for you to approve the grant of either tax exemptions or tax deferrals, combination of both. But they can't be overlapping, but there could be a combination of both. So that is, those requests then come before you. There's an AM that comes with that. There's an AR that you guys adopt with that. I'm sure that you're likely to want a work session to talk about the details of it. So there's that process that's also out there. But that's step 2. We have to show in that application that the return on the projects is not viable without this, and partnership is a loose term, but without these tax incentives from the city to help bring work and get the project up to full use, will make it financially feasible. And then we also have to show that this project brings real benefits to the city. And some of those benefits we anticipate maybe up to 830 new jobs. No loss in the current tax revenue. The $235,000 that you are getting right now from the Key Bank building and the other properties, always there, increasing as the CPI increases over time. It's just the taxes that would be assessed on the construction are exempted or deferred and then paid at a later date, and then it kicks in and the deferral is paid and they start paying full taxes. But at that time, the project is hopefully, the projections would be for it to be financially feasible, it's fully occupied, it's leased up, we're talking about, and it's pretty.
Ms. Johnson has a question. Ma'am?
Are you familiar of any other instances in the municipality of Anchorage where we've taken sort of the liberal adjacent properties that are being done with this? The Key Bank building, as you can probably imagine, is concerned.
Yeah, in the swath of property that you did for Fairview, you identified that whole swath as being a deteriorated area, even though you were, each building itself may not have been deteriorated. But you said that revitalization of that area included some that hit those 5 factors on the earlier slide, and the adjacent properties, by making them eligible for people to ask for tax, could, yes. So the answer is yes.
But, and that's, I see your connection. It's interesting because that ordinance is slightly different because that is using tax abatement for infrastructure versus using the full deteriorated property ordinance that we've used for other cases like that in the Kingdom Desert. So I was wondering. And then I haven't.
Maybe if I just add a point on that, is that this, the $235,000 that's being generated in property taxes is largely from the Key Bank building. And the designation, proposed designation of this as a deteriorated area will not affect that. So in terms of the fiscal consequences of this, they're largely negligent. You know, you're paying $235 now, you designate it as a deteriorated area, it continues to pay.
Right.
What it does is it creates an incentive
And
for.
I think we all understand that. My concern is setting precedent,
Mhm.
and that's where I'm going with that question.
But there's no intent here to do anything to the Key Bank building other than incorporate it into the project. So it's not being torn down, it's not being destroyed, it's going to be, the outer walls are gonna have to be removed so that that galleria can connect Fourth and Fifth. And the skin of it, the exterior skin of it, is gonna be up. I think the intent is there to upgrade it and make it fit.
Right, but my concern is, as you just took the deteriorated property ordinance for Fairview and translated that to this block to bring Key Bank into a deteriorated property block, I'm just concerned if we, if we're taking a stretch here
Yeah.
by.
Well, but you have to remember what the state law that says you can do this, and the ordinance itself says that property such as the Key Bank building is eligible to be included if it would encourage, enhance, or accelerate. It doesn't say that all the buildings have to be, unsafe. It doesn't say that. It says buildings like the Key Bank specifically, if they encourage and enhance, can be included.
I think the
Mr.
other
Potter,
thing-
to add to this discussion?
I think the other thing to emphasize is that this is a case-by-case study every time. So you may call it a precedent-setting event, but actually each one has to be brought forward on its own merit. The Key Bank building and anything else that you look at in the future has to be looked at, what are the opportunities for the communities? Does that piece of property and that building contain things or have aspects or opportunities that some of you may not even be aware of that allow for a better and bigger project to happen? So in the Plaza area, kitty corner from Town Square, that's always been envisioned as a glassed-in winter garden that would then have a view to the mountains, Town Square, and be a lively area where a lot of light would come in and people, the public, could come in and utilize that space. The other thing that many of you may not know is that when the Egan Center was built, on the west wall, south corner, there's an insert into the wall panel so that there could be a future tunnel over to that plaza space. And so there's a possibility of now opening up the entire basement level of the Key Bank building, coming up through the winter garden, and also having pedestrian access by a tunnel below grade over to the Egan Center to actually combine those even more. So now all of a sudden you've got below grade, you've got above grade access over to the PAC, and all of that starts working better together. Those are the opportunities that you need to look at, and I think would take away from the issue of whether this is precedent setting, because not every development.
I think we understand the opportunities is more. I'm just trying to, you always have to, or we should always look to not only what's good for the present, but what are the long-term effects in the future? And that's my question. The other, and I have to apologize because I just started reading my packet today, and I haven't read the whole ordinance. But is there something about tipping fees as far as Northern Lights?
Yeah. And we've been talking about that. Tim, do you want to share your response on that issue?
I don't know if we were going to get to that in the presentation when we talk about that, but as Barbara will indicate, that part of this ordinance wraps the demolition of the Northern Lights into it on a prescribed deadline basis. So it has to come down as part of this overall thing. There's the intent to also redevelop on that piece of property, but to get rid of the existing building, yes. few incentives, as you maybe heard at the Live Work Play housing presentation, very few incentives that the city has developed, very few tools to excite, entice, incentivize different projects and developers to do things. So we've got tax abatement, tax deferral, and what else? So there can be a waiver of building permit fees as a possibility. The other would be to look at the ability to have some reduction in the cost of the tipping fees for the demolition material, which then also helps in the approach to that demolition being done a different way that's more cost effective as well.
And I'll just do a red flag here. I've worked with a number of projects, and the tipping fee has been an issue. I mean, Port Warrenzoff was one of our cases with tipping fees and cleaning that up, and it's still, I don't think, it's not clean. But was trying to get tipping fees waived, and this is precedent setting, and it isn't something that the city has done, and it's not an easy, I will have to really think about it. Just going from past.
I've got a few people I've got to get to.
Okay, I should say it's not waiving, it's setting, it's reduced.
Right, but it's still.
Either or.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Hall, sir.
Yes, part of what I was going to address, Mr. Potter already has, but as far as precedent setting, to me, the only approach that I'll take at this is the Live, Work, Play housing group has identified the importance of a revitalization of downtown Anchorage, the fact that people want to live there. I had the opportunity to visit Phoenix 2 years ago. My son-in-law is a public defender there. And we left the heart of downtown where his office is, old downtown Phoenix, and went a couple of 3 blocks over. And he said, you wouldn't believe it, but 5 years ago, there was nothing here. Nobody even wanted to live here. And they started a revitalization, and the restaurants, the synergy was unbelievable. And I think that that's what we have to weigh, is what's good for this community. And what is going to be a benefit to the citizens. And I think getting a project like this moving is what is critical. And I do believe these are case by case. I think if we step up and agree to help incentivize the revitalization of downtown Anchorage and get it going, I think it'll go just like it did in Phoenix. Once it goes, then your problem is trying to control it, because everybody suddenly wants to be downtown and enjoying it. And we've been missing that in Anchorage for a long time. Nobody, including myself, really gets excited about coming downtown in the evening. And we've just got to go and get that back. It's really important. But one question I am curious about, with the Key Bank building, you've already you addressed the fact that the mezzanine may go into that. So you're actually going to, that building would be incorporated into the project as a whole. And yeah, I'd like to know what's going to happen with that building. From what you're telling me, I don't think you're going to get done, and the Key Bank building's still going to be sitting there. I think something's going to look different.
The two-part answer, and I'll repeat earlier, we're definitely still at the conceptual stage, and until some of the moving parts begin to solidify, the answers have to be seen as conceptual. But the vision is that there's a continuous pedestrian walkway, galleria, 1 or 2 floors in height. You can enter from the 4th Avenue side, from the 5th Avenue side where the vacant lot is, or as Tim was describing, kitty corner from Town Square Park is where the Key Bank building will remain on the exterior as it is today. But 2 things would change. The plan is, it's shown that this is a lighted atrium, a space that is sunny and warm through the year, and then the possibility of dropping down and connecting at a lower level to the Eaton Center, and then maybe most importantly is a seamless entry from that area into that full Galleria space.
Okay.
That's the vision, a few details to be worked out before precisely it can be delivered.
I appreciate that. And at some point, I'll wrap up, but at some point, I would like to have Mr. Pop come up. I would like for him to address incentives. Communities do incentives, and incentives go away. I know at one time, San Antonio, if you brought a company in that had an X number of employees, they'd write you a check for $10 million. Just, here it is, we want you. They did that for a number of years, and then it just went away. They had what their goal was. They achieved it, so they stopped. So I would at some point like to have Mr. Pop explain incentives, because quite frankly, we never got that in Alaska. We just assume everybody just wants to live here and we don't have to incentivize development, and I think we're way off on that.
Ernie, once we're done with the assembly members, we'll get Mr. Pop up here to talk to us.
Perfect, thank you.
Ms. Dombrowski, ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer, I think you might be onto something with the tipping fees being precedent setting, but I don't think the concept of what we're talking about today is, because I think, if memory serves, Mark Marlowe's property was similar to what this is bringing up. But if I may, Mr. Chair, I just would
Go ahead,
like
ma'am.
Julia just to comment if she has any recollection of that.
Through the chair, Mr. Dusky, you're correct. The Assembly has approved a full swath of property downtown, on the east end of downtown. It hasn't been developed yet, but it passed this first stage. And just like this property here, there were several properties that were deteriorated and many other properties that were adjacent to deteriorating. And as has been explained here, the concept that's in the state code and reflected in the city code is that for viability of projects, the assembly is allowed to designate is specifically allowed to include properties that are adjacent to deteriorated properties within the deteriorated area. So that, to the extent that there's precedent, that has been set. Right, I was thinking his was more defined as deteriorated than the key bank building.
I think that in the first project that was the old McKay building, that was a single project, you had a finite area. But with the second project, that covered several blocks.
Any other questions for some members? Mr. Steele?
Yeah, I just, on that same topic of tipping fees, I have a call into Solid Waste Services. I was concerned about how close are we to having to close up the cell, or do we need to do that kind of thing? What kind of expenses are we going to have? If you notice in the request, it's waiver or reduction, and so I think that's a negotiable item, at least in my mind.
Any other questions from assembly members? Anything else, Chris?
Well, I suppose, anyone else, I guess, if Mr. Pop wants to add some things, that would be great. I guess I'll have maybe a wrap-up word or two, but one would.
Kate?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to let you know our schedule, given the transition, it's impending. The applicant intends to have their application to the CFO when? Very soon, I'm sure. I've been meeting with them on a bi-weekly basis, and I intend to have the review done and to the mayor for his approval and review by, I believe, June 10th. And then we would bring that forward to the assembly by June 26th. So we encapsulate this all before the challenges of the transition that will be.
Thank you, Ms. Gard. Mr. Pop, sir? If you don't mind, come and talk to us.
Not a problem, sir. I'll just speak from here if that's appropriate, Mr. Chair.
Did you get the photos I sent you?
Yes, I did. Thank you. So in answer to Assemblymember Hall's question through the chair, I wanted to express just in general terms, incentivization is a common tool in municipalities seeking to accomplish development goals of their individual community. What is it that they want to see happen? And then structuring incentives that put that strategy into place in conjunction. Those incentives can be everything from streamlined permitting processes, or project advocates within the permitting process, to full-blown tax abatement like we're talking about today, waiving of fees. And this is being done successfully in cities small, medium, and large, and has been done for several decades. It has to be done with eyes wide open. Obviously, there has to be clear agreements between the municipality and the proposer in terms of metrics that need to be met, and if they aren't met, what are the penalties, the consequences of not meeting those metrics, structure that needs to be in place. But the municipal code has those particular elements in place, but I think from a competitive point of view, this is how you get things done. Where you are seeing an area that hasn't seen significant development, whether it's Fairview, which is the Assembly in its wisdom adopted the overlay that it provided, that is going to hopefully kickstart new development and redevelopment, which is a challenge in a community like ours that is now buildable land constrained. to strategies that are focused on other neighborhoods, whether it's a neighborhood redevelopment or commercial redevelopment or mixed-use redevelopment. And with comp plan components in place, I think you're in the bounds of policy in terms of the broader incentive strategies that are being proposed. And I think that they definitely line up with what many other communities across the United States do. We have documentation, white papers done on redevelopment strategies that we can provide if the Assembly wants to dig into a much broader conversation, but I didn't want to take that much time in this particular work session.
Questions, Mr. Hall?
Yeah, I want to be clear that how communities offer incentives and then they take incentives away. And I just wanted you to verify that it is a tool that a lot of communities use to reach their goals and objectives of what they want to do. I think a classic example of that is Boeing in Seattle. The incentives they offered to get them there, and then they got in and got settled, and they kind of renegotiated, and then Boeing moved to Kansas or someplace. So I think it's important to all of us to understand that this is incentives that we're going to offer to the benefit of this community, and only as long as it benefits the community. When you get that momentum and synergy going that it takes to keep this development moving, then you don't have to be quite as free in what you're offering.
I think it's an appropriate observation that there's a balance between the needs and desires of a developer and the development goals and desires of the community. And I think that that's where this discussion starts, is the passage of this ordinance and then developing that relationship.
Okay.
Any other questions from Assembly members? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. A reference to the chart that's up on the wall. If we finish testimony on the 12th of May and it's passed that night or not, then the rest of your chart comes in play. But I reserved the Assembly chambers for the 14th, because if we don't deal with this on the 12th, we're going to start meeting, continue the meeting till the 14th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because I want this item dealt with.
Mr. Trainee?
Sir.
I'm curious. I was in another meeting last night, basically to some degree about this, a resolution supporting it. And I heard at that meeting that there may be an S version coming
I've
forward.
not heard anything about an S version, sir.
If that indeed happens, then we reshuffle the cards, because we have an S version introduced in regards to the testimony. I'm just curious that
If there's an S version introduced, then the people introducing it, for example, administration, would have to conform to our requirements to go ahead and have an updated sheet that tells everybody what the changes are between the original version and the S version. That would have to be done. We passed that, a year ago?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've not heard about an S version yet,
okay,
sir.
I heard it last night. Mr. Baker mentioned it. I have no idea what the status may be on that, but just a bit of a heads up. And the other thing, Chris and Derek and Terrence, I want to talk specifically about the 4th Avenue Theater a bit. You were gracious enough to give us a tour of the building the other day, and I got the impression when I heard you speaking without being prompted. As a matter of fact, the words that I'm going to use are words that I heard you using in discussion about the theater. About it, it was important to you to maintain the spirit of that theater for the community, and I'd kind of like for you to expand on that a little bit. Because, you know, the one thing that we would definitely want to do with an understanding is that whatever that means and however that would be worked, because at one point you were talking specifically about the murals that are on the walls in there, preservation of those murals either within your building or possibly, somebody said maybe the Denina Center, there's some great walls over there. You had mentioned the same thing about possibly the lobby. Could you share just a little bit about what I overheard you guys sharing when we did the tour?
Well, since we took ownership of the property under the foreclosure sale in 2008, we have actually been working diligently with our designers and architects to see how we can actually revitalize this deteriorated building since we took ownership. So we have always had the best intent to preserve recreate some of these spirit or characteristics or even architectonics of the building. So for instance, the icon, being such an iconic building, we definitely want to inherit and incorporate the facade and the marquee sign into the grander project. In terms of some other interior elements, which are very minimal because it has been stripped clean, we actually would like to reuse some of these murals, gold leaf and silver leaf murals, to be restored and displayed in a much proper place. So for a project like ours, the 4th and 5th Avenue project, we definitely want to find a grander lobby which everybody can actually come in and enjoy all these beautiful treasures that we have actually not been able to see. So that's one of our interests to continue to explore. Without having to go through a thorough due diligence, whether it's seismic structure or even thermal envelope, I can tell you and share with you the building is actually in a very unsafe condition. Even though we have continued to incur expenses to upkeep the building, just this past January, my gas bill is $9,000 just to keep a empty 4-story building warm. So, despite the fact that it was assumed that we have allowed the property to deteriorate, we are actually at the point that it's becoming a financial burden for us to continue to invest these kind of expenses. However, we believe revitalizing the building will definitely be a great solution, and also trying to bridge the past into the 21st vision in order to celebrate this into a better city and hopefully pick Anchorage on the global map.
And maybe just the way I'd add to that is, at the sort of simple, symmetrical sentence, I think the theater needs the project. I think that it's been stubbornly resisting revitalization for 10 to 20 years, because just doing it on its own, it's really hard to find a way to put the $10 or $15 million into that as a private developer to make it return on your investment, or if you're the public sector. We had a vote and the people of Anchorage decided to not support that. So the solutions for the theater as a building and as a theater use have just not worked out. The project as a whole provides finally a mechanism to do the things that Derek has said, but the project needs the theater too. There's value there that we would really like to hold on to. The facade, the sign, elements of the lobby, the murals. It would be crazy to not take advantage of that. So it works on both sides.
Okay. And you don't need to answer this right now, but I would assume at some point in time, prior to an action on this, we could get a bit of a memorandum of understanding about that process. And the reason I'm not embarrassed to ask you that is I heard you doing the conversation without anybody probing you to share that information. So it was obvious to me that you have a real concern and you want to be able to do that. I can't imagine that you wouldn't. You would be the biggest attraction on 4th Avenue with
also
the tour.
to address that concern, as I have addressed in my opening intro, my family and my company has actually experienced to work with both on the public side as well as the federal and municipal level. This we know it's a partnership in terms of design process, so it comes back and forth. It's not going to be we propose this building and we expect this to be built. It's an ongoing dialogue. But without having this sort of designation, it's harder for us to jumpstart the platform into the next phase. So with that, I encourage you to reconsider our request and our
Thank you.
Mr. Steele,
Yeah,
sir.
on that same line, we have all heard, and I know I heard from you also, that it's an important place in terms of the history of Anchorage. It is on the National Register. Are there any constraints or hoops that have to be jumped through in terms of dealing with the National Register issue?
I heard Christine Bunnell, who's the staff person to the Historical Preservation Commission here in town, answer that question several times, and she's always said no, there are none. If it's private property, that by itself is not a constraint. I think there's some opportunities there that would be silly to miss. I think as Derek and Terrence have both said, there's every intent to try to take advantage of that. I think the answer is that there's some market realities, there's some physical realities, just the seismic and structural issues. So if you're not hearing a final answer, it's because We're waiting for some initial indication that the city would like to partner to see this project move forward. That creates the opportunity to go in and begin to spend some of the real money to figure out how you can do this most effectively. But there's no wavering in the intent.
I think the quick and easy answer is that if the property owner wants to pursue federal tax advantages for working with historic properties, those kinds of things, then that being on the National Register kicks in. If they choose not to pursue any of that, maybe advantage towards financing or that approach, they could knock the building down and there would be no repercussions from that standpoint. Might be from the community. So there is no obligation to retain the building just because it's on the National Register if it's privately held.
But a willingness, and that's the important part. Thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to thank the presenters for doing such a fine job. And I also like to recognize the many citizens that are in the audience, Mr. Chairman, and a lot of them I invited to show up. I know we have a
You're
public...
responsible for this crowd.
I am. I know we have a public hearing on Tuesday where people get to speak, but
And
we do
maybe
have...
Thursday.
But we do have about 45 minutes left, so I would really like to give some folks an opportunity to either ask questions or make some comments since they're all here and we do have some time, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Domowski?
Mr. Chairman, I just barely see the top of his head, but I would like to welcome our mayor-elect to the
That's right, he is back there. Do you want to come join us? You can save your tomatoes till later. He's not coming forward.
So if we can,
Cost you the hospital.
please.
Glad he's here, though.
So if you'd like to talk to us, anybody want to talk to us about this issue, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And not a lot of time, and we're going to end this in about half an hour because we've got another meeting to go to, the fire station, police station. Go ahead. Hi, Mr. Godstein.
Thank you. My name is Robert Godstein. I owned the building from 1991 till 2009. I believe it was 18 years. I really challenge the statement that the building is deteriorated. It was when I got it. There's a long history of the city's involvement in this, including appropriating $800,000 to bring it up to code, which provided an easement, a preservation easement on it. And it would not have been torn down but for the fact that that money was not used to bring it up to code. And so when Act 3 decided they didn't want the building, when the fire department came in and said you must bring it up to code, they walked away from the loan at Key Bank, which I purchased it for $600,000. And the foreclosure extinguished that easement that the city had. Then I subsequently did actually bring it up to code. So I absolutely challenge the statement that it's not in good shape. If it is stripped down, it's been because it happened in the last 6 years. It was in very good shape, and I lost it not because it was not economic. It was because I made a poor business decision aside from the building and used that building as collateral. It had nothing to do with the condition of the building, and I am 100% sure that the office space could be leased for the costs of the operating expenses in the building. And if it's costing $9,000 a month to heat the building, it's because the roof is still really not replaced with R value. Dan Coffey said in a mayor's debate that each investment that had spent more than $100,000 on it. I never had to turn the building on, the boiler on, for 6 months out of the year. And most of the heat was going through the roof because there was no R value and there was a lot of water going down into the floor because the ceiling, the roof was failing. So it was brought up to code because I brought it up to code electrically. I brought it up to code handicap accessible. I sprinklered the building. I fixed the architectural damage that had taken place in the building. I served over 100,000 meals. It was an operating business. So I don't see it in any way, shape, or form that it's deteriorated. Now, I have a lot of other things I can say, but I'll leave it to others, and you'll certainly be looking forward to my testimony on Tuesday.
Questions from assembly members? Thank you, Mr. Godstein. Appreciate it. Anybody else wish to testify? Jane, come on forward. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly, my name is Jane Avick, and I had the pleasure of serving on the Assembly and had the honor of representing downtown for 6 years and am familiar with the Fourth Avenue Theater. in 2007, worked with Anchorage Historic Properties in an effort to try to encourage the community to save the theater. I have only one thing to say, and that is, I loved hearing that the developer wants to save the spirit of the Fourth Avenue Theater, and if the Assembly and the administration seek to provide this opportunity to go forward, that it's very important in my mind that we secure a memorandum of agreement or other contractual obligation that actually articulates the efforts to save the mural, to save the sign, to save the entrance into the theater, so that there's actually real knowledge of the fact that it existed at one point in time. And there were many different conversations in the public about what was or wasn't going to happen. I would see it as an opportunity for the administration and the Assembly to say, in exchange for a tax credit, our interest is to make sure that the murals are saved, that the signage is saved, that the entrance is preserved in whatever way or restored in whatever way it can, so that the physical presence of the Fourth Avenue Theater is celebrated and is part of the development.
Thank you,
Right.
ma'am. Any questions from Assembly members? Yes, Mr. Potter.
Chair, I'll take Ms. Anvik's comments as a segue into something that you also heard at the Liberal Play Housing group discussion. And that was that one thing that is woefully missing from the legal box is development agreements, so that you would contractually obligate both the municipality and the developer, regardless of this project, as to who's going to be doing what. So there'd be in writing a contract so that the developer knows what to expect from the city and the city knows what to expect from the developer. So as we go forward with this, just keep that in the back of your head, that that is somewhere where we should go as a mature city. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. Anybody else wish to testify in front of the Assembly? Come forward, sir. We need to get your name for the record, sir.
Yes. I'm Bob Mitchell. I'm an officer on the board of the Alaska Association for Historic Preservation.
Welcome to the meeting.
And I was very pleased to hear that the project is still in the conceptual stage, because that means that there can be further thought given to the concept. Reference was made early in the presentation and in previous week's presentation about the one Kearney building in San Francisco, which basically has been a facade preservation project. The building, and a very, very fine one, the building was a tall office building to begin with. The interior spaces were fairly typical office spaces, so that particular project could fly very successfully as a preservation project preserving the facade. The Fourth Avenue Theater is a somewhat different case. It not only has a very impressive and unique facade, but the entire interior of the theater space itself is unique, with the reliefs on the proscenium in the theater, the expression of the Alaska flag on the ceiling, the panels in the both the lower and upper levels of the lobby. It is a three-dimensional whole. It is not just a facade, and therefore to be considered really as a valid historic preservation project, just simply preserving the facade will not happen. I would really like to see some way that the space of the theater itself could somehow be incorporated into the overall lobby that connects these three structures. And I'd really like to have an opportunity to meet with you folks to discuss that a little bit at some point in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions?
Anybody else wish to speak to us? Come forward, sir.
name is Brian England, and I've lived in Alaska, in Anchorage, all my life. I remember seeing Ghostbusters when I was a little kid with my mom at the theater. And I think there's a real opportunity to we keep talking about, the sign, the facade, but it's more, so much more than as you just said. And we're talking about trying to bring people into downtown. I think a restored 4th Avenue Theater with tours, like a museum, would be a great draw for people. And we talked about millennials and people wanting to come into downtown. Preserving a extremely unique building like that in Alaska, more than just the front, is a huge thing that will draw more people there. So I think everybody understands downtown needs some revitalization, but I just want to make sure we find a way to preserve as much of the theater as we can and still move this project forward.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your testimony. Sir, you had a comment?
Yes, I do, and I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today, members of the Assembly. My name is Michael King, and I personally want to thank Elvira Jackson for mentioning to me about this meeting. And so that's what caused me to come here. And when I saw the article in the paper that hit the news about this project, it was the first time since I've lived here in 10 years where I actually decided I was going to rethink my long-term retirement plans of relocating to Portland, consider, if this kind of project goes forward, staying here in Anchorage and continuing to be a lifelong contributor to this economy, if you will, because this is the beginning of a project that has the ability to provide the kinds of lifestyle, services, and amenities and city that I love to live in and to call home. One of the things that comes to my mind when I started thinking about this project was the opportunity that I had several years ago. And I had to really think about the impact of this encounter I had with a visitor to our city from Shanghai. And I asked him specifically, what do you think about your experience here in Anchorage and in Alaska? And he said something to me that I have never forgotten. He said, Anchorage is the most forgettable city and the most unforgettable state that I have ever lived in. And when I think about that, I know it does sound amusing, it's true. What can a person think about when they come to our city and say was memorable when they come to visit our state? And when they see our state, yeah, they talk about the mountains, Denali, the moose, bear, but what about our city? And what can our residents look forward to when they come here to talk about as an experience that parallels other cities like Austin, like San Diego, like Portland? Because when you go there, you know that you're going to have, and I couldn't believe what Portland had done in the last decade. And when I look at what we've done comparatively, we have the opportunity to be that kind of a city here in the north, the best city, if you will. And I believe that part of this process was my determination to get engaged in this and to talk to you about that. I support this ordinance, and I hope you do pass it to begin, not to solidify, to begin the process of being able to start that dialogue with the developer, with concerned constituents in this community that want to see the 4th Avenue Theater as some sort of incorporated project that not only elevates the quality of the architecture that we have in our city, also will attract and, quite frankly, bring other investors, whether it's from our state, whether it's from the contiguous United States, whether it's from the Pacific Rim, whether it's from Europe. Because projects of this size, scope, and scale, we have to compete with other cities around the world to get. And when the first one comes, it makes it that much easier for others to come, because they're waiting for that first one to happen so that they can see how the financial structure was put together, who supported it, how the process works. These people are not familiar with our codes and what they need to do. But if they can see that someone was able to do it, they're going to put the manpower, the legal services, the support, and the money in place, because we're a desirable place. We're a business-friendly place with which they can put their money and invest in. And we're a safe place because it's the United States of America. We're still one of the safest places to invest these kinds of dollars in the world. So I hope that you would consider and support this ordinance to begin the process of how we can revitalize. I actually call it vitalization, not revitalization, because we haven't gone through the decay that many other states have gone through in cities. We're just vitalizing at this point. So I thank you for your time.
Thanks for your testimony, sir.
We got the time, so.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Miranda Walso. Thank you for your testimony. One of the things I wanted to point out is that there were a lot of people that came to this meeting. However, there weren't as many in one of the first meetings that happened today. That was a meeting that talked about the challenges that builders are facing right now. The challenges in getting projects going, permitting and planning and how these things go forward. Right now, there's a groundswell movement in whether what Anchorage is going to look like over the next decade and the next 200 years. That's a debate worth listening to. However, don't forget the details. These projects are great in ideas. It's easy to talk about it. We've seen a lot of different visions. But for something like this, don't forget the importance of understanding, crossing the I's and dotting the T's. Because we've seen bridges that fall down because they don't have any things. This is a project that has the opportunity to really help bring Anchorage forward, and I think it's a great idea. However, at the ideological stage of this project is not the time where they say, I'm for it or I'm against it. It's the time where we talk about Anchorage as a whole, not just this project.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to testify? We've got to round this up.
Yeah, I just actually had a question for Mr. King. Have you thought about running for the assembly? As long as you don't live on the hillside, I'm all in favor.
And if you want to move to hillside, let me know. I'll give you money to run in this area.
Or you can live on the
Very
hillside.
nice of you to say.
That's true,
By the way,
Jennifer.
I've written you all a letter in support of this. It was all in your inbox.
Thank you.
Well, you talked about Anchorage is an unforgettable city. I remember going to Minneapolis, where the whole downtown is connected with walkways.
Correct.
You can park at one area and walk for hours, never go outside.
But
And
happens to somebody like myself who doesn't like to be inside.
You could bicycle. But I'm wondering why we live in an Arctic environment. We've never thought about interconnecting the entire downtown. So you can park in one area and spend your whole day downtown without going outside. Because in the wintertime, it gets old. Sir, do you want to say one thing?
Do you have a question about the slide that has to do with?
No, I just want to tell you guys that when you look at the slide, we're going to try and finish it on the 12th, but if we don't,
Okay.
on the 14th,
Okay.
my goal is to get this, either yes or no, but we're going to get this agenda done by the 14th if it's not on the 12th.
I thought maybe you'd ask a question about a different
No.
subject. You got it covered. Thank you. Excuse me. Thanks.
Sir, one last comment. We're going to get out of here because we do have to get to a police memorial.
Good enough. I'm brief. I'm Ron Holmstrom. I'm involved in the entertainment industry in Alaska and have been for the past couple of decades. I'm here basically as a cheerleader. I think this is really exciting. I served on the commission a few years ago, the Save the Fourth Avenue Commission, and this is getting really exciting. And I see that there's ways to work within what these folks are doing and what all the people at the rally on Saturday were asking for too, which is basically the preservation of this great historic property that we've got. I should point out, just FYI, one of our people put up one of the rally attenders put up a Facebook page, and almost immediately got almost 5,000 people to join up on it with nothing but support. So this is an infinitely doable deal to make all of us happy and make the downtown area something we can all be proud of. So like I said, I just came as a cheerleader, so thanks for your time.
Thank you. We're going to end this work session. Madam Clerk, you have something to pass out to assembly members relative to the library work that's going on there?
Yes, just so that this is for all the assembly members. It's a little timeline. It's from the administration, from Mr. Michaelis. So it's giving you a timeline and a map. So it's telling you where you're going to park and where we're going to be meeting this summer. So I'll just pass this out to
Bring your bike because we may have to use it, Jennifer, so we can get to the building. This meeting's over. Thanks for being here.